Incense burning. Incense burning. All space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddhas smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas.
I would say good morning, but it's really good afternoon. David, so good to see you. Welcome. And everyone else too. So today I'm going to talk about one word and then we'll be done. Threshold. Thank you for coming, and now we can leave. Threshold, you know, I've talked about this word. Most of you have heard me speak to it at this seat and informally out there. It's my way of connecting me to myself in my environment. And so Now, all of our lives are inevitably made of a succession of borders and thresholds. You can't avoid them. They're everywhere. But so what? So what that they're there? Well, for me, it's a huge piece of what I do in my life around managing myself and my awareness. So we have lots of thresholds, and I decided I was going to look it up and see what they have to say in the books, in the Google. And so according to the definition, a threshold is what you step across, which Rob just did. Thank you, Rob, for demonstrating that. It's what you step across when you enter a room. Okay. You do it all the time. It also says a threshold is starting a new stage in your life, or having a new experience, or starting something new. It also said, but these are in succession. First, it's about walking into the room. Then it's about starting a new stage. Then it's about, it takes you from one place into another. So outside into, catch a plane, you go to a new place. Threshold is a point of departure and transition. Departure and transition. Another kind of threshold is a limit or boundary. So a limit or boundary, as you may know, in medicine, they talk about threshold, pain threshold. You've just reached the ultimate, and now it's time to do something different than what you've been doing. Athletes also have thresholds. Some athletes, when they're running and they meet a threshold and can push through, or they have to stop. Thresholds are geographical in nature. There's geographical boundaries. So we know we have city boundaries and county boundaries and state boundaries and country boundaries. When I was in Ireland, the country was, I was out on an island, and the country, meaning outside of the place where we stayed, had boundaries with beautiful stone hedges. And that helped people know whose property was, and the cows, by the way, whose property was whose. And if you looked out into the landscape, it was gorgeous, these stone hedges. And if you walked up close to them, you could see their stones. How do they do that? And they're just as gorgeous, and they fit perfectly. There's time thresholds. Certainly when I was in the school, the time was the bell schedule, the end of a testing period when assignments are due, or other kinds of time to go, time to come. We hit the threshold. Age thresholds, coming of age, the decades. 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And each of those thresholds have meaning. Oh my God, I'm going to be 20. Oh my God, I'm now 30. Now I'm 40, now I'm 50. And so it goes. And it has meaning, it has societal meaning, and it has personal meaning. Thresholds. So who knew, or who stopped to think about all those thresholds? And who stops to really think about what meaning they provide for us, for you? As I sat back after looking on Google about thresholds, I came to realize that birth, old age, sickness, and death are all thresholds. And we talk about them pretty regularly through the Buddhist practices, but do we really stop to see it as a threshold? Do we really pay attention? And we can go back through that birth, old age, sickness, and death, through all those thresholds I just defined for you, and say, do we really pay attention to that? The biggest and probably the largest one that we may or may not pay attention to is internal thresholds. The internal and external thresholds, we really do notice the external, but what about those internal thresholds? How do you know when you've met an internal threshold? What happens to you? And I know I've spoken about that in terms of awarenesses. Where in your body do you pay attention to when you know that you've just increased the threshold? And what do you do when that's happened? Or do you wait till it's beyond the point of perhaps no return? So we just had another example of a threshold door opening and closing. Good morning, Elsie. Doorways can be the obvious sense of threshold, but doorways provide not simply a passage between rooms, but awareness of the thresholds within ourselves. And the key word there is awareness, as we were just talking about. How do you know what's going on inside? There you discover your own limits and thresholds, not out here, but in here. It may mean taking the risk that old certainties might be replaced by a new way of seeing things. It can be at these times that it doesn't take anything very substantial for you to fabricate a closed door. I'm not going there. I'm going to close the door. I don't get it. I'm going to close the door. It's uncomfortable. I'm going to close the door. Do we really pay attention at those times? I'm being introduced to something new. I'm closing the door. I'm asking at my work to do something different, to change jobs. I close the door. Not yet. I'm being asked to stretch, to really try on something different, to do something different. Do you close the door or do you step in? And stepping in doesn't necessarily mean that you take it on. It means that you at least step in. It can be at these times that it doesn't take anything very substantial to close the door. It doesn't sometimes take much. Knowingly or unknowingly, how many times do you self-impose a closed door? How aware are you that there's even a door to be opened or closed? It's perhaps through these ideas of threshold that we've mentioned, that I've talked about, that we live in terms of time. Time to go. Time to turn on the oven. It's a breathless world. We hurry, we scurry, we run, we lose track of time. Even here in a monastery where things are slowed down, it's like, wow, it's the end of the day. What happened? Where did it go? How do I catch up? We multitask, we organize, we make lists, we check off lists. We move the list to the next day. It's helpful, but who's ruling who? How do we keep track of the demands on time? Who's ruling who? Who's in charge? And then we yearn for a day with more hours so that we can complete more tasks. I can hardly wait. 2 days, I'll be able to slow down. 3 days. A week, this Friday, I'll be leaving on an adventure. And I'm thinking, then I'll be able to rest and relax. Some of you may know years ago, when I was living in Portland, years ago now, my mom came to visit. I was getting an award and she came to support me. It was really wonderful. We were downtown Portland. And as we finished, we were walking across the street from the hotel where this event happened. She was walking next to me and all of a sudden she disappeared. She was on the ground. Like, Mom. She looked up to me and she goes, I think I've broken my hip. And she was going to leave the next day to go back to her home. And I was going to leave the day after that to go to Hawaii to finally get my vacation. And my first reaction was, no, you can't break your hip. I'm leaving in 2 days. Because she didn't live in Oregon. She lived in Texas. Like, no, 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 no. What do you mean you broke your hip? No. And sure enough, the ambulance came. She broke her hip. She was in the hospital. She had her surgery. She was in rehab. She came back to stay with me and my partner at the time. The trip came and went. I was still there. And it was the wholeness of my heart, I was there for her. But I was exhausted before I even got to that moment, because I was waiting for that moment when I was going to get on the plane and go to Hawaii, where I did graduate school. I was going to visit friends and just rest, swim, and just take it easy. What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? This becomes a rushed and frenzied experience. But as we just experienced these last 3 COVID years, time can slow down. Most people, unless you worked in a hospital or other places that stayed open, continue to work. But many people work from home, and many people slow down, and many people were really uncomfortable. How do you live like this? I miss my friends. I miss the parties. I miss going out. I miss shopping. They slowed down. They checked out for a while, and then a lot of people I know suddenly after a year probably started checking in here. Perhaps for the first time, they experienced sacred time. Sacred time. Sacred time is time spent being present to the moments available to us whenever we choose to pause and breathe. Sacred time. When we allow ourselves to slow down, we can then begin to see perspective, gain perspective, experience perspective. And it is here that we can have a turning point. It means taking the risk that old certainties might be replaced by new ways of feeling. Taking risks, trying something new, stepping in, learning something new. Sacred time. Ask yourself this: am I willing to cross the threshold of new understanding by being open and receptive, not closed and defensive? Am I willing to cross the threshold of new understanding by being open and receptive, not closed and defensive? How do you know the difference? Not up here, but down here, below the neck. How do you know the difference? Will the threshold expose the liminal state, a state of ambiguity, being comfortable with uncertainty of not knowing? The trapeze artist swinging and looking at his partner or her partner. And at some point, they think they know. The timing has to be right, and they let go and reach for that person. Ambiguity, the liminal state. Right here, right now, at Heartwood, we're experiencing the liminal state, the ambiguity, the not knowing. We know that Heartwood is up for sale. We don't know anything much more than that. yet. And how are you experiencing that? All of us probably can answer it differently on different days. Certainly us that live here experience it differently at different days. What meaning does that have for you? When I worked in Portland, my last school was a kindergarten through 8th grade. And the year before I got there, they had a school fire. And it was during the day, which we never practiced fire drills during the day. And so the kids were at lunch. I'm sorry, we never practiced fire drills during lunch. We always practiced them while everybody's in the classroom, knowing exactly what to do, when to do it, how to do it. But that day, during lunch, the teachers were other places, the kids were in the cafeteria, in classrooms and outdoors. And the fire alarm didn't sound like it usually did. There was the liminal state. And there was chaos. No one got hurt. They had to move to a new school, which is where I came into the picture. And a year and a half later, we moved back to the school where the fire happened. And on the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary of that, I said to the principal, we have to do something. No, let's just not. No, we have to do something. We have to honor the fact that this happened and it was a year ago. And now we're back in the same building. So I offered to take the teachers back to the building. And this was not, we weren't back in the building. We were still in the temporary building, back to the building that was cordoned off, fenced off. If they so desire, it wasn't a requirement. Because they were saying, we're no longer Marysville. That was the name of the school. We're no longer that. And it really surprised me, but I wasn't in the fire. But I knew they were all traumatized at certain levels. So we got to the school, the building, the burned building. We stood in the foyer. We got to go inside the fence. And I said, this is a building that was and will be Marysville. And this right here, you all of us are Marysville. Are Marysville. The heart, the soul, and the mind of Marysville. That will never change. And so as we remain in the liminal state here at Heartwood, as we don't know where we'll be a month, 2 months, 3 months, next week. Hope not next week. We don't know where we'll be, but this is Heartwood. That out there is Heartwood. And Heartwood houses the Dharma. And no matter where we go and what we do, the Dharma, the true Dharma is there. Whether we're standing out in the courtyard, sitting here talking Dharma, in class, or out at the grocery store, is Dharma. Sacred time. Threshold moments. Turning points. How do you sit with, experience, and manage all that? What stories do you tell to keep you from opening and stepping into those doors? The most profound threshold remains that which is between the inner and outer, between going deeper into the interior self and emerging to meet the world beyond the self without protective defenses. Without protective defenses. That's the most profound threshold moment. Sure. The most profound threshold remains that which is between the inner and outer, between going deeper into the interior self and emerging to meet the world beyond the self without protective defenses. It's living on the edges. yet being profoundly centered. What are the centers and edges of your own life? Just take a minute and think about that. What are your edges? What is the center? Are the edges not perhaps the center? Does the center perhaps hold the edges? What are your edges? What is your center? More years ago, I was running an alternative school for kids who are about to be expelled from school for violence or drug and alcohol violations. Pretty hefty thing. You know, you can go and go and go, and suddenly there's a line, there's a boundary, there's a threshold. You either go to this alternative school, which is within the public school system, or you're out. 14 to 18-year-olds. For most of them, that meant something. That meant something. So we had developed this alternative school that they came to. And it was academic, but it's also personal, social, anger management, communication skills, and working with them to find their edges. Before they left the program, and they were about to be graduated from our program and go back to their home school, they were they were asked, but it was a requirement to go to a challenge course. And one of the challenge courses was a very high pole, 30 feet in the air. And there were many challenges, but this probably was one of the ultimate challenges. And their challenge was to go up this pole 30 feet up. At the very top of this pole was a platform, probably a 2x2 platform, enough to get up there and stand on it. No railings. Even now, talking about it, my hands are sweating. And I did it, right? Once they got up there on that platform, the only real way down was to jump for a bar that was hanging, hold it, then let go, and trust, because they were belayed in, trust that the person that was holding that belay would lower them down safely. Check yourself right now. Check your internal compass. Just talking about it puts me right back to that place. And being one of the adults, they said, you go first. And I did. Back then, it was a little less scary, but not much. How many thresholds was that? Simply putting on the outfit and hooking into somebody. And it wasn't just somebody, it was one of their peers that they've been with for maybe 8 weeks. Then having to climb up this pole. It wasn't a big pole. It wasn't a big tree. It was, pole sufficient in the ground that it would hold someone going up. And then at the top, there wasn't something to hold on to. Last rung was near the top of that pole. So you had to figure out how you were going to get up and on that platform, which was near the top. And then turn around. Getting down was not an easy task, if at all. And then leaping for that bar. Holding on. In some cases, until you couldn't hold on any longer, you just absolutely had to let go. And then find what? That person you didn't know if you were trusted or not really was there. And of course, we had another staff right there in case something went badly wrong. but still. But still, threshold moments. That moment when you will never forget for the rest of your life that you had to make a decision. Now, many of our threshold moments aren't necessarily that extreme, but you can better believe, and we videotaped it, so then we got to watch it afterwards and talk about it. It wasn't just this one and done thing, we talked about it. What was it that got you up there? Sometimes it was a lot of talking, it was support of their friends, it was having done something earlier that think I can do this. Some people were like, oh, I can do this, and they got up there, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is not what I thought. I'm not as big and bold as I thought I would be. Threshold moment of understanding. All these moments. And our life is a lot like that. Maybe we don't see it in that way. Maybe we don't experience it that way, but truly it is. Because we don't know the next moment if we'll be sitting here or driving our car. It could be the end. We don't know. We don't know. We aren't given a date and time when we're born to say, this is when you're out of here. Do good work. Pay attention. For those of us that didn't grow up in Buddhism, we just started learning this. It looked, for me, different growing up. And certainly it was going to be way, 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 way down the road when I would go to church. And now I'm down that road, way, way down the road. Maybe not way, way, way down the road, but I'm way down. I'm way down. I asked earlier, are you willing to cross the threshold of new understanding by being open and receptive, not closed and defensive? What are the centers and the edges of your own life? Are the edges not perhaps the center? Does the center perhaps hold the edges? When I asked you that the first time, does that look and sound differently, or is it about the same? Because threshold moments come up after we get information. If you compare it to climbing that pole, if I took us all out there and said, okay, I have a pole in here, now we're going to do this, what would happen? What would you do? In our Buddhist practice, what would be the threshold of liberation? To quote the great Tibetan yogi Milarepa, impermanence is the gate to Buddha's teachings. How does one enter this abstract gate into the Buddha's teachings? Liberation is the end goal, wherever that end might be, as I said, today, or a month from now, or a year from now, or 30 years from now. Taking refuge is the act of crossing over this threshold that asks you to go to that deeper place of learning, cultivating and growing into ways you may not have known or understood. Now, whether you take formal refuge or whether you informally take refuge as you begin your studies in Buddhism, it's that beginning step. It's that first rung on that big pole. Stepping into refuge for Buddhist practitioners is not an escape from society. It's not a get out of jail card free. Rather, it's taking time to study, to retreat, to immerse yourself, to practice, and to step out into society, to step out into your daily life, and not leave that behind, but to bring it with you. What do you take with you? What do you put in your backpack of life and carry with you from your Buddhist studies? Or do you leave it in the book on your desk. Understanding what we're learning and truly feeling it, not up here, but down here, gives us the pass out of this samsaric life. That's the key. That's the card. It's an opportunity to let go of our grasping and clinging, to let go on that platform and jump, knowing in your deepest part of yourself that you will grab that bar. And if for some reason you just didn't have enough oomph, there's that lifeline. You are tethered in. But it doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come at the end of your life when you're ready to pass over. It starts today. It starts now. It's asking us to step into the world and live differently. Taking refuge is stepping into the world differently. It's loving all sentient beings, and caring for them. Just yesterday, Yeshi came running up to my room and said, Soma, there's a snake down on the walkway down below. And I think it's shedding its skin. And because I always talk about, we are like snakes shedding our skin, and that's a good thing. Snakes need to shed their skin to be able to continue to live, as do we. We need to shed in order to continue to live. So we went down there. I was so excited. It was not shedding its skin. I think it was dying. There was blood. There was blood next to that snake. And its mouth was open, and I think it was, first I thought it was dead. We thought it was dead. And then I kind of gently poked it, and it kind of twitched a little bit. The second thought was the Kabusita, because she's the bodhisattva, all sentient beings around here. But we just stuck with it for a little bit. And it looked a little perturbed, if that could be a word for this snake that was dying. But we decided to leave it alone and let it take care of itself and do what it needs to do and not have a human being intervene. All sentient beings. It's a choice that fundamentally changes life, this Buddhist practice, with the ultimate act of liberation for all of us. So let's step into this practice of ours. Over the last few years, we have been studying, slowly stepping into Dorji Cheng, Buddha the Third's discourses, and studying what is cultivation was, for most of us, the first step in. What is cultivation? Buddha Master teaches that cultivation is to leave the cycle of reincarnation, liberate yourself from all suffering, become a holy being, and persevere until you become a Buddha. Wow. Now, did you just close the door? Say, are you kidding me? Become a Buddha? I don't think so. Or did you open that door and step in? Say, yeah, I'm going to do this. It means getting out of this samsaric life, death, cyclic pattern. Now, if I can do that, yeah, I'll keep that door open. I'll step in. He goes on to say, to leave the cycle of reincarnation, we must establish a mind determined to leave the cycle of reincarnation. So we've got to go into our mind and say, yeah, I want this. A mind of firm belief, a mind with immovable vows, a mind of diligence, and Mahayana bodhicitta. All of which are based on right view, which is one of the practices of the Eightfold Path. And if you look it up, which I have over many years, it's one of the first ones, right view. How you see things will determine what's next. How you speak, your actions, right speech, right action. If you want to have, then he goes on, if you want to have this true state of mind that is determined to leave the cycle of reincarnation, you must first understand impermanence. The second step is to have a mind of firm belief. You must firmly believe in the sufferings of reincarnation, which has its source of impermanence. So he just said that 3 times. Did you catch that? That's the beauty of his teachings, is that he says it, and then he says it again, and he says it again. This is what Shakyamuni Buddha spoke to. 4 Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. Right view, firm belief, and that this world is impermanent. Everything, all of us, all of these things are impermanent. And what I really appreciate about this studying is that it really teaches me in depth over and over again what that really truly means. Goes on to say, to understand what cultivation is, you must understand the 8 fundamental right views in Buddhism and cultivation. 1, mind of impermanence. All that exists will not last. That's the causes of cultivation. And 2, mind with firm belief. Causes of steadfast, firm belief. I will do this. I can do this. Stepping through the door. I'm leaving the door open. I'm walking in. I'm going to do this. Mind of renunciation. You're determined to leave the cycle of reincarnation. This is the cause of liberation. Mind with true vows. Action. Vows are action. I vow to. You can do that through refuge. You can do that through becoming a monastic. You can do it silently to yourself. Mind of diligence. Persistence in your advancement. I am persistent. I'm going to continue to study at all costs. Persistence. Precepts, the cause of correct direction of cultivation. The precepts are a guide. It's that guide that you open up and say, oh, this is how you can do it. It's what the Eightfold Path is. It's teaching you. Stop before you speak. Pay attention to what you see. What view are you holding? What action will you take? Dhyana, training of mind, samadhi, by taking the time to practice meditation, to sit with it, to sit, to calm yourself, to empty the space. Bodhicitta, the causes leading to becoming a bodhisattva. Bodhicitta is mind. Citta is mind. And Bodhi is awakening with wisdom. Wisdom and compassion for the benefit of all. Bodhicitta, bodhisattva. A mind of bodhicitta is a mind of great compassion. And we can all talk about compassion, but it's through action. Belief, heart, action. How do we do this? How do you come through the door and stay inside the door? You do this through awareness, through contemplation, through engaging with and practicing our three karmas of body, speech, and mind or thought. Paying attention, self-reflection, and noticing each moment, each threshold moment. Two weeks ago, was it? You got this book? 3 weeks ago? So Bosita got this book from her mom and read what I'm about to read to you. And I was so enthralled with it that I got one for myself. The Longing in Between, Sacred Poetry from Around the World. So I would like to end with this. Water here. The poem is this: bring all of yourself to the store. Bring only a part, and you've brought nothing at all. That's it. Bring all of yourself to the store. Bring only a part, and you've brought nothing at all. What's great about this book is he gives you the poem and then he does writing about it. And that's what I'll read to you. Bring all of yourself. These few lines get to the essence of spiritual seeking. What does it mean to bring all that we are to God's door? How do we stand fully before the eternal presence? We could call that what? Buddha nature. We could call that Buddha nature. This is the fundamental dilemma faced by every seeker. The truth is that we are always before the eternal presence, but most of the time we are not aware of what is happening. The problem is not that God isn't there, it's that we are not there. I'm going to read that again. The problem is not that God isn't there or Buddha nature isn't there, it's that we are not there, not fully. What then does it mean to bring all of ourselves to that meeting? Striving to be fully present, we wrestle with our own reflexes, trying to bring our whole selves to the threshold, and yet we hold back. We each have a deep-seated instinct to hide. We feel protected when hidden. To be unseen is to be safe. This is the entire purpose of the ego, to create a social mask behind which to hide ourselves. We gather our experiences, stitch them together with a narrative, and present that patchwork creation to the world, saying, "This is me. Look no further." The formulation and modification of this ego mask becomes the primary work of our lives, and we too easily forget that we are not that mask. We forget that we are, in fact, something much larger and less easily defined. The act of hiding becomes institutionalized in the awareness. Only a rebellion can overcome this entrenched pattern. But before that revolution can catch fire and spread throughout the psyche, we need to recognize the effects of this dynamic, and we have to truly decide that we want to hide no more. Now we need to be clear with ourselves that there may very well be reasons to present a specific image of ourselves in social situations. Some parts are emphasized and others necessarily held back. Some aspects of our lives are appropriately private or sacred or vulnerable and not to be casually shared. Here's the thing. That same valid self-protection mechanism becomes spiritually toxic when we try to hide aspects of ourselves from our own awareness or from God. We need to drop those fig leaves that were a naive attempt to hide from the all-seeing. The fullness of all that we are is much bigger than any story we seek to fold into it. We cannot truncate parts of ourselves to force a snug fit inside the story we want to tell. We must dwell in our entirety. Anything less becomes self-dismemberment. When you first read that, it was just like, whoa. Anything else, anything less becomes self-dismemberment. We must claim all of our history, all of our feelings and thoughts, the painful and the celestial, all together. And then we step up to the threshold, hesitant, naked, vulnerable. We step up to God's door. We enter the eternal present moment. That's when the magic happens. The large, unwieldy collection of victories and wounds we brought with us comes into focus for the first time, and we have a vision of ourselves, our whole selves, alive and immense, integral within the living immense universe. That which we were hesitant to look at within ourselves becomes an image of beauty and, yes, majesty, blissfully melting into the majestic beauty all around us. Do you feel that? We all, at some level, crave this encounter precisely in order to heal the deep pain of separation. If we come with less than our whole selves, if we come with our only fragments of our being, how then can we find healing? Bring all of yourselves to this door. Bring all of yourself. All. Step through the door. Check yourself. And then keep walking. Keep knowing. I'll ask us to sit with us for just a few minutes. Life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes quickly. Opportunities are lost. Take heed. Do not squander your life. Thank you all for coming.